Anna Lenarcik, and welcome to today's episode of Melody of the Future, a series of conversations about how technology is changing the way we create, share, and experience sound and music. Today, my guest is Alex Smith, my co founder, a PhD composer, and sound artist exploring the intersection of music and technology. We are discussing the impact of technology on the creative process in music, including both its potential benefits and the challenges it presents. Alet, as someone who straddles experimental composing and tech innovation, how has the creative process for you changed? With tools like generative AI and smart plugins, do you find that these technologies enhance your creativity or not?
I think so. I mean, I think they can enhance, well, any technology can enhance anything, of course, depending on how you go about using it. For me, it's really cool because I'm really into using new tech, old tech, every tech, anything, non tech, like whatever I can find and just smashing it together and seeing what happens, basically. But when it comes to AI specifically, especially with plugins, I don't really care about AI powered plugins at this point in time. It's not necessarily any different than a non AI powered kind of plug-in situation for me. I mean, I can see how for other people it might be useful, especially in like mixing, mastering, that sort of thing. But when it comes to using it for sampling and for resampling, and also timbre transfer, which is a really cool technique where you take one sound and you put it into a timbre transfer plugin, which basically, I don't know, it takes the sound of a drum and turns it into a saxophone. So you get like the same kind of rhythmic contours and the same sort of like melody, if there's something like that in there, but with the new sound. So it's very cool, and you can make some really cool, glitchy, nasty noises with all of this stuff. So for me, overall, this new, I don't know how you would call it, this new sort of advent of technology that's coming with AI, it's really cool. It is opening up the creative possibilities in a really big way, and I think also it's this notion of a new aesthetic that's coming because of this. Because when you think about it, it's not creating the real music. It's creating a version of the real music. It's what like if you ask an AI to generate you some jazz, it's not really making you jazz. It's making something that sounds like jazz and feels kind of like jazz, but it's not really. It's like a sort of shadow of it or a photograph in a sort of weird way. So it's actually really cool because, of course, you can kind of mix many photographs together and kind of create a new sort of collage through this, if that makes any sense. So yeah, for me, it's great. I'm glad we're at this point in history.
That's interesting what you say because in the music industry, generally, there is a very big discussion that these AI generative tools are stealing copyrights because they are trained on copyrighted data, music pieces. And well, I think it's obvious that you can literally make the prompt very specific prompt like jazz music from beginning of 20th century, right? And then you can relate it to the result with specific artist from that period of time, and even the same motifs, the same arrangement. And I don't know, you said that this is not exactly the same music, and I also agree because you can hear that it sounds still like AI generated music, even though sometimes the production, I would say it's quite impressive. It
But it's
might
not
be.
production. This is the thing. It's your impression of what should be production, but isn't. It's an
Mm.
AI creation. It's a fantasy somehow. But let me ask you a question that kind of might trip you up a little bit here with this, just as a way of looking at it slightly differently. Imagine that you're a child, that you're like, I don't know, 4 years old, and you're stuck in a in a room and you're never allowed to go outside, and the only thing that you ever hear is like one speaker in the corner, and from this speaker only comes 12 tone, sort of Stockhausen, Boulez, dodecaphonic, serialistic, whatever you want to call it, music, right? So you only
My
ever hear
favorite.
these bleep bloop kind of melodies that are really dissonant and weird and don't really, they're not the most sort of like melodic or whatever you want to call it, and you think, is that child, if if that's you, or if you just want to sort of think of it as an abstract child, it sounds weird, is that child going to come out and start singing then something like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or a kind of normal nursery rhyme? They probably not,
Mm.
because contextually that's all they understand as music, right? is this kind of very jumpy kind of 12-note thing. And I think you could sort of argue in a sense that AI is a little bit like that because it depends on what you put into it. If you're training it on jazz, as this example from the early 20th century, and you kind of think, okay, well, that could be like, let's say sort of Charlie Parker, I don't know, who else? Who would be a good example? I'm trying to think of someone that's not a sax player and I'm mind fogging. Charlie
I can.
Christian, Charlie Christian, the guitar player from the 30s, Django Reinhardt, any of these people, you put sort of three, four, five different people together. And the point is that because they're from a similar period and they're doing similar stylistic things ish, and there are going to be crossovers within the harmony, the melody, the phrasing, the instrumentation, the length of the songs, whatever it might be. And the AI is going to be averaging out that data, within the training set. So the thing is, it's not that it's copying any specific thing. It's not like, as if it's going to listen to, like some Frank Sinatra thing and be like, I'm going to take this bar of Frank Sinatra and I'm going to take this bar of Mingus and I'm going to take this bar of Coltrane and put them together and create jazz. It doesn't work like that. It's taking averages of those things. And because there are quite a lot of crossovers, that's why you end up with this sort of generic-y sounding thing. And sometimes there might be something which sounds a lot like a person, but it's kind of not really. Having said that, though, if you did literally just train an AI on, say, Nirvana or something, right? You take Nevermind as your training data. Of course, what would come out would sound like Nevermind because that's all of the reference that it has.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the copyright issue though, it's much bigger than this because it's like the sort of economics question with AI and all of the way that the sort of job market is changing everywhere in every industry. And it's like, well, okay, maybe this is now a time where we can start to question what copyright is. Should it work in the way it has been working? Can we license things differently? Can we use other technologies like blockchain, smart contracts, all this kind of stuff to be able to change the way in which we share music and who owns what and how parts of that ownership maybe are communal or decentralized? It's
Hmm.
it's really a very open question, and I think the problem is that so many people are scared of losing the power that they have within the industry as it stands, that they're not willing to think about this change and whether it's actually a positive thing and where more people could get involved and more people could potentially become creators. And it's not going to work like that. And that's, for me, that's pretty awful. And I'm very much on the side of saying, well, if there's a chance to change things for the better, then where more people can become involved and more music can be shared around and remixed and remade. And of course now, this remix culture, not in the musical sense, but in the kind of TikTok sense where you remix other people's sort of content to then sort of make your own. Well, why can't we apply that in the music industry?
That's a good question because if I think about social media and TikTok trends, it's literally the same sequence of words, movements, and sounds made by millions people sometimes, right? So, yeah, and even the person who started get famous because of it. It's not even about keeping the how to say copyrights for themselves. That's an interesting question. I know that there are some initiatives to make some changes in the law and how the systems, like copyright systems, work. But of course, it's gonna take time for sure since the proper solution appear. Like, how would you see this?
Well, I think the issue that you've got there is that, of course, governments are, or the European Union maybe, as it might be in the case of us, because we both live in the EU, obviously. I think these things take too long to change, so they're always behind the times anyway. And I think that the issue here is not so much the changing the copyright idea in and of itself. I think it's that all of the things around that, as I said before, like economics and the kind of social situation in various different countries, and of course across the world, and all of these different things are all related to one another in some way, or they have connections to each other. And I think whilst you have the idea of sitting here and saying, oh well, we should make copyright kind of free for everyone, then you could also look at it and say, well, okay, yes, but whilst there are wars going on and people are still homeless, hungry, education is not where it should be, really. I think overall there are, and education itself needs to change as well, because it's also really old fashioned and stupid in a lot of ways. And like, I think the problem there is that you can look at it and say, okay, creativity is a wonderful thing and it is the glue that holds, kind of everything together in society. And it's the way that we sort of view and experience and hear and kind of imagine the world. But at the same time, it's not people being killed. It's not going hungry. It's not, not being able to afford to live somewhere. And I think that those issues kind of need to be solved first somehow, to then be able to put us in a position where we can kind of be more creative within how to solve the creativity issue with copyrights, if that makes sense.
I don't know. Well, some artists struggle also with money to earn some money from their music, and it's sometimes it's not because they lack talent, but because of the system. For example, they are not recognizable enough to
Well,
earn.
I think talent, to be honest, is not really relevant now,
Mm,
because it's like, if you have a million followers on TikTok, you will make money out of it. If you don't, you're not going to make money out of it. It's as simple as that. It's like, I think it's a choice that you have to make, basically, between whether you want to be successful sort of financially, or whether you want to make things that you want to make and just hope that people, support you. And I think that's a really difficult thing. But at the same time, I would say that there are probably quite a lot of people that don't care. They just want to make whatever will work to be famous.
mm.
And I think that's a big change now in the last, certainly, let's say 10 years, compared to how it used to be, where, the idea that you would get these sort of, little groups of people from random places, and they would sort of meet up. I'm thinking of things like the Human League and these like early synth groups, and like, it would be kind of random people that sort of wouldn't make sense. And they would get together and they would all be like passionate about like computers, and they'd all sort of go, oh, let's make a band. And that doesn't really happen anymore
Mm.
in that way. I think it's not the same. And I'm not saying that we should go back to the past, because also I'm not a nostalgic person in that way, or I'm not sort of saying, the past was better. I mean, I think there's plenty of good things about now that are way better than it, obviously used to be. But I think that it's really, yeah, there isn't really a solution to this at this point, because I think there is an allure to money and vanity, you know? There's always going to be this, right? Like, everybody has their vanity. Everybody has this desire to have more money, because that means that you can have a slightly better life, hopefully, within this kind of capitalistic way of being that we all have. And, whether that's good or bad, it's not really relevant right now. But the point is that I think, I can see why these young kids, especially, that are kind of coming up now, they spend their time, of course, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, whatever it might be. And they already have that system there, which we certainly didn't when we were young, when we were sort of teenagers. And I think it's a really odd kind of moment for music.
It's funny that we haven't talked about this yet in this way. Yeah, I mean, I can relate to this in terms of how digital world forces you how you exist as a creator now. You have to be basically present there. You have no choice.
Well, there's always choice. There is always a choice. It's just more a case of, if you want to go down the road of saying, well, I'm going to make what I want and I may put it online or not, and I'm going to try and apply for like maybe arts funding, or, if you're from maybe a well-off background or whatever it might be, or you're lucky to be able to sort of just get yourself into places where you can have your work played,
Mm.
then that's fine as well. But I think it's very difficult even to apply for funding now if you don't have a lot of followers on social media, or presence, I should say, rather than followers. Um,
I think so. And even when you get these grants or scholarship, you are obligated to post on social media. So you have to be there. Like you have no choice, basically, I would say. You have to, like, even with this last funding that you got, right? You told me that. But there is this role that you have to post and promote this funding,
I mean,
this program.
not always. There are some. I don't know whether I should name places. Probably not, actually. But like I think there are some places that very much are about art and the whole sort of infrastructure around that, which is great. But also, again, that's kind of like a very specific kind of a situation. And I mean, the place I'm thinking of specifically is not. It's not something that just anybody can even get into. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's not easy. And also, I'll say it depends on what you're trying to make. Because if you want to make like pop music or let's say mainstream music, and the whole goal of it is to get it out and like, get it to as many people as you possibly can, then, why not use social media? It's great because there are so many people across the entire world that you can access all at the same time that you can communicate with, that can communicate with you and tell you whether they like your stuff or not. And, you can really play with the system. So in a way, I think
Hmm.
for more mainstream music, it actually is better than it used to be in a certain way. If you're trying to create like more, let's say like art music, whatever that might mean, sound art, then it's maybe less useful because then the point isn't really to sort of appeal to everyone in this sort of mass way.
But in this digital world, because you have access to this digital world, and more people have access, and more people can use it and search the content they want to consume. But in the same time, the amount is also like bigger and bigger. From one point of view, you can have access to like even very niche music, very niche art, and now I think this is the way it's evolving. This whole digital world allows you to find your niche and find your group, find your art that really resonates with you. While in the past it wasn't possible so much, like you were dependent on, maybe radio, TV, some papers, and some people around you that you could exchange
Maybe, maybe,
your music. But also to the amount of content can be overwhelming as well. And now I think even releasing the album is not so popular as in the past. I mean, artists still release albums, but also like tracks, singles. This is the way they produce music. They even don't care to make the whole story with more songs or some music pieces. So and the way we consume the music, the art also changes. Everything is faster. And I remember I used to listen albums like a whole thing, and there were of course like songs that I preferred more and some I maybe didn't like as much as other. But also I've been listening this album as a whole story, as a whole piece, as a whole thing. And now I don't do this anymore, and I'm very picky. I can listen to a few seconds of the song and go forward to the next one because I know it didn't catch my attention fast enough.
well, they can't
And
all be bangers, right? But like, I think it depends on the because actually, if you look at it from like the artist perspective as well, like making an album is a hell of a lot of pressure because you have to be able to make like let's say 12 reasonable quality songs, hopefully with like one, two, three like singles or whatever you would call like the kind of title tracks. And the thing is that that's a really difficult thing. Like for anybody that is watching that's not a kind of creator or isn't a musician, like you can't necessarily just sit down and do it. It's not like baking a cake. Sometimes you can sit there and, with a guitar or a keyboard or just with your thoughts and a pen and paper or whatever it might be, and like it just, nothing comes. And then you're sat there stressing, and it gets worse when you can't come up with stuff. I'm trying to just think of albums where I could listen to like the whole thing, and I'm like, thinking, oh yeah, every single track of this is like really good. And I mean, there are some that come close to this. Uh, I'm thinking of like Death Grip's Year of the Snitch. I really like that one. I think it's 2018, I'm gonna say. But yeah, even thinking of some like, really, really classic big albums like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and this kind of thing, I don't like every track on there, at all. And I think it makes sense for artists to be able to kind of say, oh, well, I have a song or a piece of sound. Even it doesn't have to be a song. I think even the idea of having like full sort of, these formal songs, as it were, with verses and choruses and all of this, for me this is very old fashioned and kind of a bit like, it doesn't have to be that. It can just be a sonic expression, and whatever that happens to be for you as a creator is a great thing. And like, if you come up with a thing and you've made it and you're proud of it, if it's 20 seconds long, then why not put it online? And if it's like, a whole album of 12 different pieces or whatever it might be, then also that's fine. I think it's really cool, though, that there is this change. I actually prefer this kind of, I don't know, like this anthology, this sort of collective anthology, I guess, of all these things that are on all of these different platforms. And what you're saying about like this idea of being overloaded, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing,
Hmm.
because like I was thinking about this idea of, or this kind of like concept the other day of like, being sort of anti-nostalgic towards the youth where the technology didn't exist, right?
Hmm.
Like thinking about, sort of 15-year-old now and the access that they have to like everything. They can literally go online and they can find how to use any software. You can find out how to like build a car. You can ask questions to chat or to, other LLMs and get answers straight away. It's not like, there isn't this struggle to learn anymore. It's like now you can purely just go and find out what you
Hmm.
need to find out very quickly, which is great. And just thinking about this whole arc of the kind of the way in which things have changed fairly recently, and this kind of overload, I don't think it is really an overload. I think it's just you have the choice and you can choose how much of that you let in or not, right? Like if you're on YouTube, for example, or Spotify probably is the better example, you can really pick what you want still. And I think it is super cool that you can go on platforms like Spotify, despite the copyright issues with it. Oh, sorry, the royalties issues, I mean. But you can go on there and pretty much put in anything and most likely get some kind of a result that will hopefully lead you to something. Or if not, then maybe you find something that leads you to something. So yeah, I actually think
Hmm.
it's all good. I think we're in a better time for music, let's say accessibility and sort of distribution, than was in the past.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that the way we used to consume the music was directly related to the possibilities and accessibilities, right? We were buying CDs or like CDs, right? Albums. And now, like for me as a music enthusiast, wonderful possibility that I can be so picky and I can do the research in such a big way. But also, I don't know, I can say that sometimes the music consumption, the way I can say even the way I consume music, sometimes it's also unsatisfying for me because the possibility of choosing this music is so wide and rarely I'm surprised with what I find,
Okay.
while in the past, because there were like access to different kinds of music than in the mainstream media, finding these other genres and this niche artists was more exciting because you really had to make an effort to find them.
Then again, don't you think now that there's a kind of an opportunity for you as a listener to, or a consumer as you called it, to kind of go through and try to find stuff because it is out there and you can certainly. I mean, what I'm trying to say is basically, do you think that like these platforms are the problem, or do you think that it's your way of searching maybe is perhaps not like the right way to go to be able to find those things? Maybe it's like in and of itself, maybe that's the thing.
Maybe because these platforms also works with algorithms. So the music I get as a like I don't know how to say matched. The music which is matched to my taste, it's very often disappointing because I don't like to listen to only one genre, and I can say that in Spotify, uh, it's not it's like usually focuses on some genre, this playlists, which I was listening like few days ago.
But you mean like playlists that you're searching for, or as in playlists that it's recommending?
Playlists that are recommended to me, so I need to.
Do you think that's a good way of like finding stuff necessarily? Like the thing is, I like
I'm
a
too
lot of
lazy sometimes.
fair enough, but I find that like when I'm basically I listen to effectively two different things most of the time.
Hmm.
Either basically 1950s, 1960s like rock music, so real old school like kind of Elvis and Hendrix and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's more broad than that, but you know, stuff from that time, or like very very modern and kind of obscure, like more electronic stuff. So Quebris is a favorite, you know,
I know.
Ortega, like all this kind of stuff, you know, and
Mm.
yeah, basically, it's kind of weird because I think Spotify for me, it doesn't know what to do with that because it's like, how can it reconcile like Chuck Berry and Quebras? It doesn't go. So
Right?
it doesn't seem to be able to I don't know to give me bad recommendations because I don't think it knows what my needs are. If you have two really sort of odd genre, or not odd, but like far apart genres of music, right?
Hmm.
So, like as I said, 1950s like rock and roll, and then you have something that's really like crazy, glitchy, you know, sample based electronic music from the sort of like let's say early 2000s, which
Hmm.
they sound completely like opposite ends of the spectrum. There is almost nothing about those two things that you know that you could kind of compare almost. And yeah, I think that basically the Spotify algorithm doesn't understand that. It doesn't get how to go like, oh, this person likes that thing and that thing. And it's kind of like, okay, so I don't know what to say to this person, so I'm just not going to really recommend too much because, like, honestly, my recommended lists are usually just those things. It doesn't seem to go. Uh,
Mm.
I don't know.
Outside
It
of the
doesn't.
box, right?
Right, exactly. It doesn't seem to be able to kind of find something in between. Because
That's
what
what I mean. Yeah.
I can't remember, but the point is that like you know I'd expect it to kind of be able to be clever and go like, oh, it's electronic, but it's also this like 50s sound. Let's try and put those together and see what. And I think the tags basically are the problem because it's obviously like tagged basically. It's not, you know, it's not going into any real depth with any of these things.
I think it's changing because I know that there are also new solutions to describe metadata and not only tags but with more detailed way.
Hmm.
And also there are algorithms that analyzes music track and also gives some information about this parameters, and therefore the algorithms might be more reliable to find similar music. But also I also expect from my AI tool that it's a part of my application to listening to the music to propose me something that I don't know yet. I want to discover, I want to find the new genres, new music experiments, and I cannot see this in this like for example on Spotify. I'm
But
very
then
disappointed.
I think though you have to also take into account that like Spotify is, you know, it's a business. They have to make money and they have to sort of please customers to some degree, which is funny because if you think about it, the musicians are almost more like workers, right? That are sort of being abused by the sort of evil corporation kind of thing. Yeah, and the thing is, like the paying customers, if you're a person that only wants to have like crappy kind of like, and I'm not saying all pop music is crap, by the way, but like just crappy pop music that's like really just bad and like, you know, generic stuff to have on in the background, basically. Then, you know, if it starts playing to you like really strange, like, you know, sort of gamelan music or something,
Strange.
no, but what I mean, it's like strange in that context. Like, you know, you're going to be like, well, I don't want that. I'm paying here to have my pop music so I can have it on in the background. Or, you know, I'm having my, I don't know, some party with my friends and I only want hardcore punk music. So don't be putting on any like soft jazz. Like I don't want that. So I think also it has to play somehow to the, the kind of generic thing. From a sort of business perspective, I can kind of understand why it would be done in this sort of much more boring kind of way. But then again, like I think, you as a user can also really engage with the platform. And I know we're talking about Spotify, but it can be anything. You can engage with the platform and you can just write words in that interest you, like experimental music or pop, jazz, funk, something or other, like whatever it might be. You can kind of, you can find stuff on your own in that way that can still be pretty random.
But I think because I don't do this anymore, this is this is a good conversation for me to also have this, let's say, aha moment.
Hmm.
That I used to spend a lot of time doing research among some music blogs, like they were very niche, and
Yeah, yeah.
this kind of discoveries were always like something that was fascinating for me. And now I think, as I said, I think I'm now too lazy because I have an app which can recommend music to me. So I press play. I do some other things because there's always something to do urgent, and I think I lost somehow this maybe no, maybe in some other words, but I think that I just forgot that there is, I can literally search it manually and not depend on any algorithm, but just got used to this.
But like I would say that well actually from kind of two perspectives. Firstly, I think, it depends on your personality as how you want to find things or if you want to find things. Because like for me when I was a kid, for example, I remember my parents had this like these really weird 90s like corner cupboards, right? So they're in a corner, but they sort of were like round at the front. So they look like kind of
Hmm.
like a half circle or semicircle, right, at the front. And you would sort of open the door at the bottom, and my dad had like his or some of his records in there. And I remember being very, very small, like sort of 3, 4 years old, whatever, and going and digging through these vinyls, right? And like just seeing all of the different covers and the different, and kind of the idea of it being this physical thing that sort of like had music on it as well was really cool. And like I can remember in great detail actually like a lot of those record covers. So thinking of things like Gary Newman, The Pleasure Principle. There were several Beatles albums. There was a couple of classical things. There was one Bach album which was like in I think Leipzig or somewhere it was recorded, and there's like the picture of the organ right in this cathedral and all these pipes and everything, and I can remember all of these things. And it was always interesting to me as a little kid to go and be like, oh, I wonder what, like if the way the cover looks sounds like the thing that's on here, right? So I would kind of
Mm.
go and do that. And then I think that's always stuck with me. And it's always kind of like whenever I see, by accident sometimes just on like going through YouTube, whatever, and I see a cover and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. Or in fact, a really good example of this is Lingua Ignota.
Mm.
So she had this album Caligula, which I think it's 2018 or 17, and the cover, it was so weird because I saw it on I think it was the Needle Drop. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Fantano. But like so she on this cover is like there, and she's wearing gold, like lots of gold chains. She has like kind of gold makeup, I think. And across like here, she has this tattoo in this kind of gangster script that just says Caligula, right, which is the album title. And I looked at it and I thought, like, that has to be a rap album of some kind, like, because you remember there was that girl, what she called Iggy Azalea, right? This
Yeah.
Australian, and like I thought, oh, maybe it's like that kind of thing, and it's probably not my sort of style of whatever. And also, I just thought like, the tattoo can't be real. Like it looks like it's thing. And so I went and listened to it, and it completely blew me away because I was like, this is the weirdest mix of like classical kind of singing in some ways with metal, with noise, with like these weird synths, and it was really refreshing, and it was like a completely random discovery for me. And I really, yeah, I enjoy those moments a lot when I find that kind of newness still, but it's hard.
Oh
um,
yeah.
but also I think like there is a question of experience, because once you get to a certain point, like I've been doing this for quite a while now, and I've been into music before, sort of professionally, for a long time, and playing guitar, and like I used to play piano when I was a kid, and like all these different things, and like as I said, going through my dad's records and just being like mega interested in like sci-fi soundtracks from films that I probably shouldn't have been watching when I was like 10, this kind of thing. And, thinking of like Terminator, Blade Runner, this sort of stuff, and like it's all kind of stuck with me. But I think also I've heard a lot of things, a lot of different things, a lot of different genres, a lot of different musics from different places with different people
Mhm.
playing them from different time periods. I've studied it notationally, like in the sort of Western classical sense. I've played it, I've written it, you know, and like it does get to a point where you sort of run out of surprising things. I remember when I was studying, going to the library all the time in the RNCM and getting these scores, and looking at like how these sounds were being made and be like, oh, it's like, if you get like a little gong and you smack it and you put it into a bath with water, it does this kind of like weird, like whammy bar kind of sound, but with a gong,
Mm.
this kind of stuff. I remember going and looking and finding out how it was made. But like you do get to a point where you sort of run out of that because you've heard it all. Because, there aren't that many sounds in the universe, unique kind of sounds. So, and I'm not saying it's all just about sound,
Mm.
of course, there's a lot of context there too. But yeah, I think it does become this question of like, do you get so kind of experienced in it because we spend our lives around music that you kind of get bored by it somehow? I think also that could be like a kind of question for you, maybe. Like, what do you
Why?
think? I want to know what you think.
I don't know. I like to come back to some music I like, or some music from the past, but mostly I crave for something new all the time. And but not in the sense that I'm looking for some very experimental music, but maybe even, I don't know. To be honest, this is the thing that I just find hard to even explain, even to myself. That's the question that I ask myself constantly. Why I like this song? Why? What is so engaging for me, so fascinating for me, so catchy in this song that I like this? Is it harmony? Is it arrangement? Is it the voice? Is it some rhythm? Or maybe some moment in this song that I find very attractive? And as I think this is not only music and music elements, as also some kind of I know taste in music that I developed on some point, and some genres are more appealing for me than others. But it's also fluid and it's changing. And I remember when I've been studying in music academy, I was fascinated in this 21st century music. With When I discovered dodecaphony even earlier in music school, I was like, wow, wow, that's something amazing. Like, this is so different. This is so cool. And this is like, like for me as a teenager, it was like, wow. And then I just realized, okay, but okay, as something that you listen for the first time, and you start to discover all of these rules and how it's made and the whole philosophy even behind it, you found out that, oh, okay, but there is nothing like that was the some on some point in time, but it didn't develop into something even more experimental, but it stayed as a part of this very, very big mix of everything, which is now in music. Because also, like when I think about music itself, I don't like this academical approach that there is this classical music, uh, how to say, high valued music,
Highbrow.
highbrow,
Yeah, like art music, but like art music.
highbrow music, art music, and there is this worst kind of music, like this mainstream. Couldn't agree this inside,
Well,
even
no, it's
though,
a very dumb argument, isn't it?
yeah,
It doesn't make sense. You're sort of like, oh well, if it's on the radio, it must be bad.
Mm,
It just doesn't work in, or vice versa, of course. Just because someone has sat there and spent time writing all these numbers out in a row and making a
mm,
matrix out of it and applying that to some pitches, it's like it doesn't make it better. I mean, I think a lot of that stuff, it's really not weathered well over time. Like it doesn't sound good. A lot of it. I'm not saying all pieces, of course, because there are a lot of examples that do. But yeah, I think making value judgments in that way on anything just doesn't make sense at all.
yeah.
But also, then there's the question of like, as you say, this sort of like it hasn't really developed too much. I mean, of course, it has, but like there are also a lot of things that are still very
Hmm.
present from the middle of the last century. And I think there is definitely in academia, like academic composing, let's say, this resistance to change.
Hmm.
And the sort of the fear, I think, of the change and the fear of the technology, the idea
Hmm.
that if you add electronics into your music, all of a sudden it's kind of like it's
Is it still like this? I don't know because lots of
I,
composers.
I could absolutely tell. I'm not going to say it on here, of course, but I could absolutely tell you a couple of people I know for sure would say that to you.
But I know many composers who use electronics, and I think it depends on personal approach. But I also wanted to go back to dodecaphony and early 20th century music because I said from my perspective, because it was fascinating, and I had this quite intensive period of time that I've been listening only this kind of music. I just couldn't even listen tonal music at some point. And also from other perspective, like from people who maybe don't quite understand the way that atonal music was composed and why and how and the whole what is behind
Yeah, sure.
this, and naming this, that this is, it's not a music, it's like some mess, some chaos. And I also think this is not the right approach because it's, even if it's not, I know, pleasant to listen, it doesn't mean that it's not music, right?
Well, no, I mean, I think there are so many problems there because, like, for a start, what is music? Great question that you get asked on the first day of music college, right, from the clever professor.
Yeah.
Like, no, really, I think you can't answer that because when everybody thinks they know what music is, right? But when you actually try and sit down and define it, you can't because it is this very blurry kind of idea and the boundary of what is and what isn't. There isn't a good way of being able to say like, okay, this is exactly where music stops, right? It's like going into space.
Hmm.
There's this idea of like Earth, atmosphere, space. But the thing is, the atmosphere is so big, and there isn't like a defined exact point, I think, where space begins. Like you could say to
Hmm.
the millimeter, like, this is Earth, this is space, kind of thing. And yeah, I think also then it comes down to this question of education, right? And it's not to say that every single person on earth needs to be educated up to doctoral level in, and have this huge understanding of like, the sort of the history of music of the whole world or something to be able to understand stuff. But at the same time, it's like it is lacking in a lot of schools. I can certainly say, like, remember in my upbringing, the music lessons in schools were not good, and there weren't that many. Like up until high school, there certainly wasn't much. It wasn't with dedicated music teachers. It was just the regular teachers, and I guess they were, probably trying their best, but they don't themselves know anything to sort of tell you properly. And I think also you have this kind of apologist culture where you end up with, I don't know if you've ever seen these recordings of like Bernstein, for example, in the like 1960s. There's one where he's got like a synthesizer, an old like Moog, like one of the big synths with all the cables in the front of it that's like the size of a person, and this thing is on stage with him and it's playing Bach to the audience, right? And it's like you see all these little children back then that the parents have dragged them to the orchestra and they're wearing their little dicky bows and they're all dressed up and everything, right? And yeah, there's like the whole audience is sort of giggling at this thing playing Bach because it's not a real instrument, right?
Mm.
And like, I think that the problem is that a lot of the time it's laughed at because it's not understood, or it's sort of shunned. It's like pushed to the side, or it can't be music because it doesn't sound nice, because it doesn't sound good, whatever that means. Because often what all of those kind of phrases translate to is, I don't understand this, so I'm just going to say it's crap and I don't like it, which is not the case often,
Yeah.
because there are some really, really great things that are borderline like sound rather than music, I would say, kind of things. It's like
Mm.
it, it's a spectrum of sound, and that's what it
Mhm.
should be treated as.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
attaching any meaning to that becomes completely subjective. But at the same time, I think everybody should be open minded, you know, should always be open minded to listen to everything and try and understand, like, what is the person that's made this trying to say through it? Like, why is it here?
Oh.
Imagine that you're standing in a waterfall or by a waterfall, right?
Mhm.
It sounds, the beautiful nature, right? This kind of thing, right? Which, if I then played that to you in a concert and told you it was noise, which it functionally and literally is noise, it's white noise, then would you hear it in the same way? You'd probably be like, oh, this just sounds like nothing, right?
Without the context? Oh, that's a good question.
And I think really the problem actually is calling anything music
Hmm.
rather than it's sound art, sound experience, whatever definition you want to call it, right? And you just treat everything that is sonic that can be heard, or I mean, there are some examples of stuff that, of course, where it's not just about actually physically being heard, but things that are around this topic, let's say, could be all kind of defined as being just on a spectrum, and that's okay, rather than having to make a value judgment in that sense. I think like yeah, it's really it's difficult to even to sort of go down that road, because like how do you sort of bringing it back to the question of AI, it's like how do you even then contextualize music with AI that doesn't understand what it even is, if that
Mm.
makes sense? Because it doesn't know what it's doing. What it knows is to average out a bunch of stuff that's been put into it, right? And give you
Mhm.
back something. It doesn't matter whether you give it pizzas and burgers, or pure numbers, or whether it's text, or whether it's sound.
Yeah.
To an AI, it doesn't care. It doesn't have any emotions,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
I think then you could sort of argue, is AI music music?
Padum. Just now. Okay. So coming back to your composition practices, can you describe your approach when you discovered for the first time AI generative tools
Oh my
and
god. Yeah. That was, I think, well, it's like half and half, right? Because it's like there's part of me, the sort of the futurist and the kind of technologist and the entrepreneur that's into all of this. It's very exciting. It's very cool, right? Like, oh, we can actually make this now, because even though, there are things, let's say intermediary solutions like sample libraries where you can already go and get material that's made and kind of you don't have to necessarily start everything from scratch. But at the same time, it's also like they are awful. Like they're just not good. The quality of what comes out of them 99% of the time is bad, I would say, because you end up with a lot of artifacts. You get this kind of very, like when I think of like the compressed sound of MP3s with this kind of slushy noise on top,
mm,
it seems to me that whenever I hear generated stuff, it tends to have a lot of that kind of, not necessarily because it's an MP3, but it seems to just be in there, which I think is a
mhm,
fault of the training data. I don't know, but yeah, I think it's very exciting. It's very cool, but I think it's a real problem because not only does it not sound that great, and it's nothing that human beings kind of couldn't do. And I think even if you think of it as like a tool for composition, where it's like being able to make I don't know, generate like 10 melodies, and then you can pick one that you're going to use to put in an advert or something. And it's like, okay, but I could probably come up with 10 melodies just as quick as that can, a couple of really basic things on a keyboard and sort of just play them into a door using MIDI. It's like, it's probably just as fast. And I also have more kind of control over what I'm doing than sort of having to think of a prompt and then giving it to that and then hoping it comes out with what I sort of want. Um, and then, of course, there is the copyright issue as it stands in the way that these things are trained, which I'm like 50-50 on, I'm going to be honest. Because, as I said, I think there needs to be a big kind of a reconsideration of like what is copyright now? Why does it matter in the way that it used to?
The value of music depends on, as you said, people behind this music, not only artists, but the whole bunch of different roles and the possibility to spread this music among people, other people to listen.
Yeah, distribution and the way in which it's distributed, like
Mm,
it's absolutely key. And
mhm.
if you don't have a big infrastructure behind you, you've got no chance. And again, this is not a new thing. I
Mm.
think now it's
But the way it's distributed now, it's changing because
it
it
is
depends a lot of the content on social media, and that's why I think that without this, it's very difficult to be successful artist and earn from.
not
Also, I was wondering because on one part I know there are this, as we mentioned previously, TikTok trends that it's like a chance to gain this popularity for short time, but if you are able to keep going and maintain this trend for your music, for your presence in digital world, this is the, I think now, the fastest way to become noticed. But also, when I think about being in digital spaces, there is also a place for more niche artists, like even this decentralized spaces. I think they are more open to, I don't know, to experimental music. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's a bit different way than on these very popular social media platforms like this TikTok or Instagram, and in these places like Mastodon, which is related to web. And I think people like transferring more and more into this kind of consuming information, because like the way these platforms work, these main platforms work, it's basically marketing lots of advices how to gain attention, and like now most accounts are selling something, and it's like I think people are becoming more and more,
sorry.
I think people are becoming more and more tired of the thing that these content creators want to sell them something all the time. I'm even suspicious because sometimes I can find something interesting in some, like for example TikTok, about some interesting content, and in the end, it occurs that, oh, but if you want to find something more, follow me and or comment my post, and I will send you something. This is so lame. I don't know
No,
it's lame, but this is.
no, I mean, at the same time, it's like imagine that you're like 20, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you just started out making like your channel on whatever it might be on like TikTok, and you you're just doing it at first, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you start to gain a few subs, and then it's like if I maybe put a t-shirt on there and put my like logo here and put it for $25 and someone buys one, then you're like, oh, that's really cool. I just made $25 off a t-shirt. And then you realize that you can keep doing that. So I think that's the thing is it's like once the kind of basically the smarter sort of people on these platforms realize that they can make money and how to do it, then it's just easy. So they just keep doing it because why wouldn't you? So then
That's also true.
it's sort of, I think, the moral question of like, is this what like I want to do? Is it what I should do? I'm not necessarily sure that anybody cares really,
Mm.
because it's like once the success starts to happen, it's very easy to just sit back and say, well, I'm just going to carry this on because it seems to work. And because of course, when you look at people like Mr. Beast or PewDiePie or
Mm.
whoever it might be, and you see the kind of popularity that they've gained through these platforms and how much money they've made out of it. It's like, well, okay, if you can earn $25 and then the next month that turns into $250 and the next month it's 2,500 and so on, and you kind of think, well, there's no reason that can't be $1 million or 10 million or more. I can see the allure of it totally, and the ease of it. Once it starts going, I can imagine that it would be very difficult to sort of to keep your morals almost.
But then why do we still call it social media? Why don't we call it marketing media and find like social media that we can socialize with people to who want to talk about some topic only without any agenda behind it?
I don't have an answer for that. I think it's definitely not what it used to be.
Right?
I do remember being on like MySpace and like when Facebook first came out and all this kind of stuff, and like it was a very different kind of a
Mm,
an environment because it was about communicating with other people more that right?
yeah.
Or maybe someone that you don't know occasionally, but it was mostly, at least in my case, it was mostly just to talk to friends and kind of
Mhm.
people who are in my like immediate community as far as like guitar playing and this sort of thing goes.
Do you remember Last FM?
No,
Really?
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
That was my favorite social tool because you were streaming music, you could publish your playlist and you could find people through your music taste.
But
And
like you were streaming other people's music,
no, you had your Winamp player and you attached Last FM plugin to your stream
right?
and it appeared on your profile on this
But
web
like
page.
what I'm saying though is that the songs that you're playing there belong to other people, right?
Yeah, I mean, there were because no, there were MP3 I owned.
Yeah, but you're still playing someone else's music without asking.
Yes,
Yeah, so it's still
not
like,
not without asking. I bought some albums. I converted them into MP3, and I
but if
put
you
it on.
yeah, but if you buy an album, you still can't play it just publicly.
Yeah, but these tracks weren't on a web page. They were only tags. So that was your playlist from your Winamp on your computer,
It sounds
published on your
crappy
profile. Why?
because when I think back to all of these things, from back then, like sort of early 2000s, and like they were quite crap.
That was so cool that you could share what you are listening to.
No, I mean, I remember certainly MySpace having like some kind of a media player that you could like upload stuff to, and I used to like upload guitar stuff that I would do to that was recorded in like the worst way possible. But yeah, yeah, I think things are definitely a lot better for the distribution, especially online,
Hmm.
because the quality level is basically higher of the platforms. It's definitely easier to get things, and at least you can sort of know roughly where they've come from. Okay, with AI, that's changed a bit again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're on Spotify and you're listening to like, Taylor Swift or whatever, then it's probably okay, right? Um,
Mm-hmm. So we are here and now, and we already are dependent on technology in a big way. So when you think about the future in 5, 10 years ahead, how do you imagine the creation experience, creativity, and also listener experience? How we will make music and consume music? Maybe there are some technologies that you think that will be more and more present, for example, VR, like AR, VR, XR, or some other stuff? How can you see the
that's
future?
about 12 different questions all at once. I think what I'll say, just to keep it sort of fairly condensed, is that the connection now between the sound and the visuals, I think, is becoming a big thing. So, like thinking about this Las Vegas sphere as an example,
Mm.
I think it's definitely going to go down the road of becoming more like holistic. So every aspect will become closer. So music and visuals. Hopefully, artists will be more open to doing things in other disciplines and bringing everything together. And yeah, I think going down that road is going to lead to a lot of really interesting sort of questions as to what is possible. In terms of creativity, I think that's always been the same, honestly. Like that's just a human thing. I think it's more a question of the tools that will, that are arriving now and that will arrive that can help you to either be more creative or to at least produce things either in a more effective or streamlined way in terms of workflows. But honestly, I don't think the actual creativity itself changes. That depends entirely on how resourceful the person's mind is to use their ideas to be able to do something with them
Mm.
and to be able to come up with ideas in the first place. Whether AI will be able to replace that, I not I don't know, because honestly, if you said to me like 10 years ago that I would be able to have a conversation with a computer that could speak back to me, and
Mm.
not sort of in the sense of like going on Google and typing something in and getting a response, but actually have a conversation which can evolve and develop and whatever, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have thought, oh no, it's like science fiction, it's not going to happen.
And
And
yet,
so, yeah, well, I think the thing is now, if you sort of go by this idea that the rate of development of technology is kind of this exponential. It's not literally exponential, but it's kind of very quick and will only get quicker. Then in sort of 10 years' time, like I really don't know what will even exist. What I will say is that I hope that there will be lots of really cool stuff that we can use, and I'm very, very hopeful that there will be a lot of new and exciting kind of art forms that come out of it.